book lovers, today I'm going to talk about this book, India by Sanjeev Bhaskar. It is a Sunday Times bestseller. I learned a lot about India just through this book. It's a travel book and there's so much to be shared. So before I tell you about this book and the 3 takeaways I got from it, I want to share a little bit about how I got this book into my hands. I remember I was traveling with a couple of friends in India, and we were traveling from New Delhi to Jaipur to see the Taj Mahal, to Agra, and we went to Assam for a wedding. And traditional Indian wedding where you get thrown by rice grains, like literally rice grains hurting you. I couldn't believe it. And we were drinking most of the time, and no one slept. I still remember. And after everything was done, it was time to head back to New Delhi to catch a flight back to Malaysia. And I remember I was at the airport and I was wondering, what can I do? What can I do to actually learn more about India? So I went to the bookshop to pick up this book, India. I saw it. I thought it was kind of interesting that it's written by BBC, but it's sold in India at a very, very cheap price. I picked it up, I read it on the plane, and I was laughing most of the time. It was quite humorous as to how Sanjeev actually wrote it, but it gives you a good glimpse into his journey through India to find where his father studied, where his father grew up before the partition. So his dad actually was from the Pakistan side, and he had to migrate over to India and eventually landed up in England. It was a very interesting story. This book actually shares a lot about it. So here are my 3 takeaways from this book. So my first takeaway is about Sanjay's trip to the Genjis river. Wow, how vivid it was for me to actually understand, the things that goes around the Genjis river, the activity that goes around the Genjis river. And he was traveling alongside it, where there were a lot of ashrams, a lot of yogis around. It was a very spiritual place that he was in, and he was describing what people were actually doing there. So you understand the background of the Genjis river coming from the Himalayas. It's a very spiritual river that flows through a large part of India, and it's like holy water. They literally sell water from the Genjis river in a bottle that you can just buy and drink it if you are daring enough. But what I found out was that the water was so contaminated that if you were to drink it, you will probably fall sick. Actually, you will fall sick because it contains a lot of bacteria that our body can take. So coming back to the Genjis river, what was depicted in the book was the cremation of bodies that is burned on a daily basis and thrown into the river, because the Genjis river represents the end and the cycle of life, from how its end to its rebirth. Well, the circle of life means that if you're born into this world poor, just live it, because there's going to be a rebirth. And if you were to do well in this world, it's time you will most probably be able to have a better life the next time. So that's how the Genjis river is depicted, the circle of life. Besides bodies being thrown in, ashes being thrown in, there are also a lot of festivals and worshippers that throws things into the river to make it even more polluted as an offering to the gods. Now the second takeaway from the book is, of course, the partition between Pakistan and India. They were one state before, and Mahatma Gandhi, together with the British administrators at that time, decided that, okay, to appease the differences within that region, Pakistan will be born, and of course Bangladesh will be born. So of course the writer was trying to get back to his father's roots, which was on the Pakistani side, and he had to go through the same routing where the partition happened and the mass migration happened. It was the biggest mass migration of humans ever recorded, and of course there were a lot of challenges that everyone had to go through. In the book, it shows how much pain both sides has gone through. The stories that he shared during that time when both sides were killing each other. Even until today, there are racial conflicts that's happening at the border, Kashmir, Pakistan, and even in India. There were so many stories that he actually shared in the book when he spoke to the locals there, and it was unimaginable. It was unreal as to how the stories happened. There were senseless killings, and there were also stories of rejoice that some actually survived it and were able to tell the story of how they managed to free themselves. There was also the Sikh conflict that he shared, where the Sikh community were forced to change their religion, but they didn't want to the point of they would rather sacrifice their women than being threatened to change their religion. Some even committed suicide because they didn't want to change the religion. And this was happening so much, the pride was so strong that the opposing party that wanted to convert them decided that it wasn't going to work, and they left them alone. So there were these kind of stories in the book that I thought was very interesting. Now, the third takeaway is about the tech boom that was happening in India during the 80s and 90s. There were a lot of middle income groups or community that started to appear, and India started to become rich in its own right. So there were pockets of tech industries around in India that started to boom, and now India is becoming the software hub of the world, providing software services for everyone who needs software development and support. What came along with that is, of course, the middle income group, but also the variety of people living in such close quarters, from the rich to the poor, from the needy to the haves, and they all intermingle with each other. I don't know how India does it. When I was in India, I saw in my own eyes the rich living with the poor. Now, in this case, in the book, it also showcases, the middle income people living in the vicinity of the poor, where the poor is being pushed up at the side, and they are staying right in the middle. So that's what I love about India. It's a place of experiences, not really a place where you can classify very well. It's just a place of experiences, of conflicting ideas, and I love that place, India, so much. So this book actually shares a lot about it. Now, what do I think about this book? I kept it for a very long time. This is my second read. I've enjoyed the journey with Sanjeev every time I picked up the book. It's his journey of finding his father's roots. He brings you along his quirky roots to share about his experiences with India, even though he was brought up in London, but he could still relate to it, and he saw it from a foreign eyes with a deep-rooted cultural need to find his roots. The keeper rating for this book is, of course, 4.5. I'm still going to keep it. It's going to be with me for a long time because it reminds me of my trip to India, and I brought it all the way back from Assam. So hope you enjoy it.